The rehabilitation of this site into a tallgrass prairie ecosystem is a collaborative effort between Earth Rangers, Tallgrass Ontario, who provided the right plants to go into the ground, as well as Wildfire Specialist Inc., who performed a controlled burn to rid the site of invasive weeds like garlic mustard and to allow the dormant fire-resistant species their chance to germinate.
Prairie species require fire. It's a natural part of their ecosystem, and what we've done here is artificially put fire back into the environment. Most people think that when you burn something, it destroys it. What it does is the nutrients that are in that item actually are still in the ash. When it rains, it's taking those nutrients back in the soil and acts like a liquid fertilizer. So the area that was burnt, that I went and inspected this morning, is doing tremendously better than the surrounding area.
With the soil primed for planting, a total of 15,000 plants from 20 different species were sowed to transform the field into a model tallgrass prairie habitat.
Some of the plants we're planting today, native prairie plants, include black-eyed Susan, butterfly milkweed, lanceleaf coreopsis. These are some fairly common native prairie plants, and we've chosen the plants based on two major criteria. One is general plant diversity. We want, at Earth Rangers, these prairie fields to be as ecologically diverse as possible, because by planting more diversity of plants, we're helping more different species of animals. The second major criteria, in addition to just plant diversity, is genetic complements to native plants in Ontario. And so the plants we're choosing are native, but they also fit genetically with the ecological landscape, and that's important in terms of the long-term positive impacts of restoration. One of the major roles that prairies serve ecologically is in the area of plant-animal interactions, more specifically pollination. So in native tallgrass prairies, you have a tremendous diversity of native grasses and native wildflowers. And those flowers are pollinated by monarch butterflies, other moths and butterflies, and bees. And so from an ecosystem service standpoint, prairies are very important in Ontario and elsewhere in Canada for supporting pollinator life cycles and life histories. And without pollination, without these native food crops and native animal and plant biodiversity, life on Earth will cease to exist in time. And these are global problems, and they need global solutions.
Tallgrass prairies are also home to a large number of birds and mammals that find themselves having to rapidly adapt to new environments to replace their disappearing habitat.
And even though some of those grassland-dependent species have adapted to use in cultural grasslands, and the bobolink is a good example. It's a bird that's just been put on the species at risk list. It is a tallgrass prairie animal, but because it's lost all of its natural habitat, it has adapted to using farmers' hayfields. So you would see a lot of species do that. You will see some species adapt over to the cultural grasslands. Those that can adapt, the weaker species or the less adaptable species, they would just disappear altogether. And we're seeing that now. You're looking at the disappearance of the badger and the barn owl. Those are all animals that we can recognize that are completely prairie dependent or grassland dependent, and not just small pockets of grassland, but large tracts, 35, 40, 50 acres. They have virtually disappeared off of out of our province. And another one that everybody can resonate with is the bobwhite quail. And even though we have a tiny little pocket of them still native down in Walpole Island, down in the southwest corner of Lambton County, bobwhite quail need almost 30 to 40 acres for one covey to exist. And to find 30 to 40 acres of native grassland in the province is non-existent.
It will take at least 2 growing seasons for the fields to really flourish as a tallgrass prairie habitat. And its development will be closely monitored by Dr. Tariff and his team here at Earth Rangers.
I think it's so important that people understand that when they're doing restoration work, regardless of the habitat type, that their project incorporates monitoring methods. And so last summer we actually began doing ecological monitoring. We've been monitoring plant diversity, insect diversity, diversity of animals and reptiles, birds, and also actually taking soil samples and plant tissue samples to get a baseline information on the soil nutrient content here. Then we did the prescribed burn, and we're replanting this year in 2012. So we have baseline data of what was here before the restoration began, and we'll continue monitoring the animal and plant diversity and changes in soil characteristics over the next decade to demonstrate empirically and scientifically that the restoration is in fact having a positive result in terms of the diversity of animals that occupy this habitat.